Hey, are they having problems with IFB? We have some. Look at the picture. Look at the picture. We have deers getting washed away. Yeah, look at my shot. We have deer struggling in the water. They're getting washed away.
Just before dawn on July 4th, 2025, meteorologists watched a slow-moving mesoscale convective vortex pull in a deep plume of tropical moisture and stall almost directly over the Texas Hill Country, refusing to move for hours in a way that turned an ordinary summer storm into a generational catastrophe. In parts of Kerr County, radar estimates and rain gauges recorded as much as 20 inches of rainfall in only a handful of hours, with some of the most rural stretches receiving over a foot of rain before sunrise. That single overnight system dumped an estimated 100 billion gallons of water onto Kerr County alone, a volume that meteorologists pointed out actually exceeded the average daily flow of water over Niagara Falls. Crucially, that rain did not fall onto ground that could absorb it. The hill country sits on a landscape locals and geologists have long nicknamed Flash Flood Alley, a region of thin, rocky, sun-hardened soil sitting atop limestone bedrock, carved by centuries of erosion into steep-walled canyons and narrow valleys that funnel water with almost no resistance. Rain that falls on these hills does not soak in, it runs straight downhill into creeks and rivers within minutes, which is exactly what turned a heavy storm into a wall of water. The Guadalupe River became the epicenter of that funnel effect. Stream gauges near Hunt and Kerrville recorded the river rising by roughly 26 feet in under an hour, a rate of climb so extreme that it outran any realistic chance for people sleeping along its banks to react in time. By the time cabins, RVs, and riverside homes were surrounded, some residents had only minutes, not hours, between the first sign of rising water and the water reaching their windows. Kerr County absorbed the worst of the devastation, with confirmed deaths eventually surpassing 100 people in that county alone, including dozens of children, out of a statewide toll that climbed past 135 fatalities in the days and weeks that followed as search crews worked through debris fields along the river.
No. You got a long way to travel for that exhaust. Dude, that poor Honda is totaled. So are most of those. Firefighter trying to help out. Oh, don't even think about that Audi. He's trying to clear that drain right there.
He's trying to wrap around the tree. Always checking if the tree will topple.
Among the sites hit hardest was Camp Mystic, a century-old all-girls summer camp built directly along a bend of the Guadalupe, where floodwaters tore through cabins in the middle of the night while hundreds of children were asleep inside. The camp's losses, both campers and longtime staff, became the single most widely reported human tragedy of the disaster and turned Camp Mystic into a symbol of how quickly a familiar, beloved place could become a death trap when a river this dangerous is allowed to rise unchecked and unannounced. Kerrville itself took a direct hit from the surging river, which spilled out of its banks into residential blocks, dragged parked and even occupied vehicles for city blocks, and severed entire neighborhoods from emergency access for hours. Footage captured from the ground that night and the following morning showed cars, including a totaled Honda and a nearly submerged Audi, being tumbled and carried downstream by a current strong enough to move loaded vehicles like driftwood, while firefighters, off-duty rescuers, and ordinary neighbors worked the water's edge trying to reach people still trapped on rooftops and in attics. The devastation radiated outward along every tributary of the watershed. In comfort, rising river water swallowed homes and recreational facilities along the banks and forced a wave of emergency evacuations. In Boerne, Cibolo Creek jumped its banks with almost no warning, flooding streets, damaging homes, and closing roads that residents relied on to reach higher ground. Sabinal Creek, normally a quiet tributary, became one of the region's most hazardous waterways almost overnight, threatening major crossings and cutting off rural communities downstream. In Bandera County, campgrounds and riverside neighborhoods disappeared under the current, and witnesses along the Cibolo Creek corridor near the edge of San Antonio and Bulverde described watching entire mature trees snap loose from the banks and get carried away, a visual so many locals cited afterward as the moment they understood just how much force the water actually carried. The flooding did not confine itself to the corridors closest to the Guadalupe. Uvalde County and Medina County both reported swollen rivers and creeks overwhelming local drainage systems, washing out rural roads, and stranding drivers who had no reason to expect the water to rise as fast as it did. Comal County and Guadalupe County watched highways and low-lying residential streets disappear underwater as local officials tried to keep pace with river conditions that were changing by the hour. Near Boerne, homes in the Johns Road neighborhood began taking on water within just an hour or two of an earlier, far calmer report from the same location, a detail residents repeatedly cited afterward as proof of how little real reaction time anyone on the ground actually had. Even Kinney County, positioned farther from the immediate epicenter, reported damaged roads and isolated rural communities as the flood's reach continued to spread outward through the broader watershed for days after the initial storm had passed. The scale of the emergency response mirrored the scale of the disaster itself. Hundreds of stranded residents were pulled from rooftops, tree branches, and half-submerged vehicles by a mix of helicopters, rescue boats, specialized swiftwater teams, drones, and civilian volunteers who worked alongside professional first responders around the clock. The U.S. Coast Guard alone was credited with more than 200 individual rescues in the area surrounding Kerrville, much of it captured on dramatic aerial video as crews lowered rescue swimmers into fast-moving, debris-choked water. Ordinary residents launched their own improvised rescue missions in kayaks and small boats, some successfully pulling neighbors from flooded homes, others forced to turn back when the current made the attempt too dangerous to continue. In the days that followed, search teams combing the banks of the Guadalupe faced a grim and exhausting task, working through mud, wreckage, and collapsed structures to account for more than 160 people initially listed as missing in Kerr County alone. That number fell only gradually, day by day, as recovery crews worked through waterlogged, debris-choked terrain, eventually narrowing the missing list down to just a handful of names weeks later. The material and economic toll extended far beyond the human cost. Bridges vanished beneath the current entirely, roads buckled and collapsed, and utility systems failed across multiple counties, leaving crews working for weeks afterward to restore electricity, water service, and safe transportation routes to communities that had been cut off. Total damage across the region was later estimated at roughly $1 billion, a figure that captured destroyed homes, ruined businesses, wrecked vehicles, and battered public infrastructure across the affected counties. Businesses in Kerrville, Ingram, and the surrounding towns saw their inventories and equipment destroyed as water filled stores and restaurants within minutes, halting operations for weeks or months. Farms and ranches across the hill country absorbed serious damage to crops, fencing, and livestock infrastructure that rural families depend on for their entire livelihood. Parks and campgrounds along the river, the very recreational draw that makes the hill country a popular summer destination for Texas families, were left submerged, eroded, and closed for an extended stretch as officials worked to assess whether the land was even safe to reopen. In the aftermath, a difficult public reckoning emerged over why so many people were caught by surprise despite forecasters having flagged the flood risk in advance. An Associated Press review of the response found that local officials in Kerr County had been reluctant to cry wolf with evacuation orders and had failed to push out wireless emergency alerts as the water began rising, a gap that state lawmakers and grieving families alike pointed to as a preventable failure. That criticism became the catalyst for real policy change. Texas legislators passed new funding to install modern flood warning sirens across the region, with 6 new sirens installed in Kerr County and additional systems funded in Ingham and Kendall County, while 28 more counties became eligible for similar warning infrastructure grants. A private company called River Sentry, founded specifically in response to the 2025 disaster, went on to install more than 100 additional siren towers at RV parks, camps, and hotels along vulnerable stretches of the watershed, using sensors that trigger automatically as water levels rise. Almost exactly 1 year later, in mid-July 2026, that new infrastructure faced its first real test when fresh flash flooding struck the same hill country communities devastated in 2025. Storms once again triggered catastrophic flash flooding in Kerrville, Comfort, and Uvalde County, killing at least 2 more people and forcing hundreds of additional water rescues. But this time, residents and officials described a markedly different response. Newly installed sirens sounded in the darkness in Ingham, Kerr County, and Kendall County, giving people crucial minutes to reach higher ground before water arrived, while Kerr County and the city of Kerrville issued a combined 5 wireless emergency alerts as the danger became apparent, a stark contrast to the near-total absence of alerts the year before. State officials pointed to the improved coordination between outdoor sirens, cell phone alerts, and National Weather Service warnings as evidence that the lessons of 2025 had measurably saved lives, even as they acknowledged that many of the promised reforms, including stronger safety rules for children's camps and broader water infrastructure upgrades, remained incomplete when the new storms hit. For survivors of the original 2025 flood, the return of heavy rain to the same river valleys carried its own psychological weight.
Water. They're getting washed away. Three. Hey, are they having problems with IFB? We have some, look at the picture. Look at the picture. We have deers getting washed away. Yeah. Look at my shot. We have deer struggling in the water. They're getting washed away. Three.
Residents who lived through the first disaster described the sound of overnight rain becoming its own kind of alarm, prompting some to wake at the slightest downpour just to check whether the water outside their door was rising again. That lingering anxiety, paired with a landscape that geologists say will always be structurally prone to this kind of sudden, violent flooding, underscores why the story of the Texas Hill Country floods did not end with the waters receding in July 2025. It became the opening chapter of an ongoing, high-stakes effort to rebuild not just homes and roads, but the warning systems and public trust needed to make sure the next storm does not claim as many lives as the last one did. If this video helped you understand the scale of what happened in the Texas Hill Country, consider subscribing to Storm Strike for more in-depth coverage of major weather events as they unfold. A like helps this content reach more viewers who want reliable, detailed reporting rather than just headlines. Turn on notifications by tapping the bell icon so you don't miss our next breakdown the moment it goes live. And if you have thoughts, questions, or your own experience with flooding or severe weather, share them in the comments below. Your input helps shape what we cover next. Thank you for watching, and stay safe out there.